Family owes nothing to family, my stepdad said. I didn't realize he'd already spent my inheritance. My dad's death was a heartbreak I barely knew how to process, but the storm that followed, the one that tore my family apart, was a betrayal I never imagined, especially not from the man my own mother brought into our home. I was only 21 when the call came. A construction accident. Just like that, my real father was gone. His funeral was small, a quiet affair with just my mom, me, and a handful of his old co-workers. They brought casseroles and stood awkwardly, like people do when they don't know what to say. My parents divorced when I was 7, his drinking was the unspoken reason. But in the 3 years before he died, he'd gotten sober. We'd rebuilt something, fragile but so incredibly precious. Sunday dinners at his tiny apartment, phone calls where he actually listened about my community college classes, these small things meant everything because we both knew how close we'd come to losing each other forever. Then there was Brad. He showed up to the funeral in a suit I'd never seen before, a suit that seemed too new, too crisp for the occasion. He'd been dating my mom for about 8 months. I didn't hate him, not exactly, but I definitely didn't love him. He was just there, filling space in our house with his loud laugh and his annoying habit of leaving dirty dishes in the sink. At the funeral, he shook hands, made the appropriate sympathetic noises, but I caught him checking his phone during the service. Mom, drowning in her grief, wiping tears with tissues Brad kept handing her like he'd practiced, she didn't notice. 2 weeks later, as I was restocking shelves at the grocery store where I worked part-time, my phone rang. It was a lawyer named Douglas Kemp. He said he'd been trying to reach me about my father's estate. My dad? An estate? I scoffed. My dad lived in a one-bedroom apartment and drove a beat-up truck with 200,000 miles on it. What estate? But something in Douglas's voice, a quiet insistence, made my stomach drop. We set an appointment for Thursday. His office smelled like old paper and strong coffee. Douglas, a man in his 60s with reading glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, spread documents across his desk. He explained that my father, my working-class father, had held a life insurance policy through his union. $250,000. And I was the sole beneficiary. The words hit me like physical objects, hard and impossible to catch. My dad had been paying into this for 19 years, even during his worst drinking days, even when he could barely afford groceries. It was an act of quiet, steadfast love I never knew existed. Douglas pushed a form across the desk, saying the money should be deposited within 30 days. I drove home in a daze. Mom and Brad were in the kitchen, cooking dinner, laughing at something on Brad's phone. I stood in the doorway, watching them move around each other with an easy familiarity, and for the first time, I felt like an utter outsider in my own house. When I told them about the insurance policy, Mom's face lit up with a genuine, beautiful happiness. She hugged me tight. Your dad would be so proud, she choked out, that he took care of you one last time. Brad, on the other hand, was too quick to congratulate me, too quick to suggest we go out and celebrate. It felt wrong, but I didn't know how to say no. At dinner, Brad ordered an expensive bottle of wine. He kept raising his glass, toasting to new beginnings. He talked endlessly about smart ways to invest money, suggesting I meet his financial advisor. Mom nodded along, saying Brad really knew about these things because he worked in sales. I just pushed pasta around my plate, a knot of unease tightening in my gut. Why didn't I feel grateful? Why did I just feel wary? On the drive home, Brad launched into a speech about family helping family, about pooling our resources now that we were all doing better. I didn't respond. I was too busy trying to figure out what he meant by we. The insurance money hit my account on a Wednesday morning, exactly 29 days after my meeting with Douglas. I checked my banking app during my break and just stared at the balance. $250,000. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having. More money than made sense for someone earning $11 an hour stocking shelves and still living in their childhood bedroom. I felt grateful, terrified, and utterly overwhelmed. That night, Mom sat me down at the kitchen table, Brad right beside her. She was wringing her hands, a nervous habit I knew well, and Brad's face was carefully neutral. Mom said they needed to talk about something important. She explained they were behind on the mortgage. 3 months behind, she insisted, because she'd taken unpaid leave after Dad's funeral. The bank had sent a final notice. Brad jumped in, all calm reason, saying they just needed help catching up, maybe $15,000 to get current and avoid foreclosure. He added that family takes care of family, and I'd be saving my childhood home. The number felt huge, but also manageable compared to what I had. I said yes. I said yes before I really thought it through, because Mom looked so worried, and Brad kept emphasizing my childhood home. We went to the bank the next morning. I wrote a check for $15,000. Brad insisted on coming inside with us, standing so close I could smell his cologne as I signed the forms. The teller counted out the cashier's check. Before I could even reach for it, Brad snatched it from the counter. He said he'd handle depositing it directly to the mortgage company to make sure everything got processed correctly. 2 weeks later, Brad mentioned his car had died. He needed a new one for work. He sold insurance from home, but sometimes he had to visit clients. He showed me listings for used sedans, around $8,000. Mom chimed in, saying Brad really did need a car, and it would help both of them if he had something dependable. I wrote another check, this time for $9,000, so he'd have money for registration and insurance, too. He hugged me, called me a lifesaver. Over the next 4 months, the requests kept coming. Mom needed dental work insurance wouldn't cover. Brad's mother got sick, and he needed to fly out to help her. The water heater broke, needing immediate replacement. Property taxes were due. Each request came with explanations that made perfect sense individually. Each amount was small enough that saying no felt petty. I kept a running total in my head, trying not to think about how quickly the numbers were adding up. By September, I'd given them $47,000. I started picking up extra shifts at the grocery store, not because I desperately needed the money, but because working kept me from thinking too much about my shrinking bank account. My manager noticed, saw I was always available, and promoted me to assistant supervisor with a small raise. I threw myself into the work, reorganizing inventory, training new hires. It felt good to build something I could control, something real. Then, in October, Brad approached me about investing in his friend's new business. Terrence was opening a franchise, he said, and needed capital. If I put in $25,000 now, I'd see returns within a year that would double my investment. Brad even had charts printed out, showing projected earnings. Mom sat quietly during this pitch, neither encouraging nor discouraging. I told him I needed to think about it. Brad's expression shifted, something I couldn't quite read flashed in his eyes. He said I should trust him, because family doesn't steer family wrong. I didn't invest in Terrence's franchise. Something about the way Brad pushed, the sudden intensity, made my instincts scream. He brought it up 3 more times over the next 2 weeks, each time with increasing frustration. He started making comments about how I was sitting on all this money while they were struggling, how I was being selfish with resources that should be helping the whole family. Mom would tell him to drop it, but she never, not once, defended me directly. The tension in the house became so thick, you could taste it. I started spending more and more time at my friend Simone's apartment. She was the one person who knew about the inheritance. She'd been with me the day Douglas called. Simone, a paralegal with her own place across town, was where I could breathe without feeling guilty. One night in November, I was venting to Simone about another one of Brad's requests, when she stopped me mid-sentence. "When's the last time you saw actual documentation for any of this money you've given them?" she asked. "Bank statements showing the mortgage payments, receipts for the dental work, anything concrete?" I stared at her. I hadn't seen any of it. I'd written checks, and assumed they went where Brad said they went. Simone pulled up the county property records on her laptop. She showed me that Mom's mortgage was current, but it had never been 3 months behind. The last payment made before I gave Brad that first $15,000 was only 3 weeks late. My stomach churned. As Simone kept clicking through public records, the truth started to unravel. The property taxes I'd supposedly paid? They'd actually been paid 6 months earlier. The water heater replacement? That would have been covered by Mom's home warranty. I went home that night and waited for Brad to go to bed before confronting Mom. I asked her to see the bills I'd been helping to pay. She looked confused, said Brad handled all of that. I pressed harder, asking specifically for mortgage statements and utility bills. Mom got defensive. "You don't trust me," she accused. "Family doesn't interrogate family." I just said I wanted to understand where my money went. She told me to ask Brad in the morning and went to bed, angry. I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, trying to make the numbers make sense, but they wouldn't. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I crept downstairs to the small home office where Brad kept his desk. The door wasn't locked. His filing system, to my surprise, was surprisingly organized. I found folders labeled with months and started pulling out bank statements. My breath hitched. Mom's checking account showed deposits from me, all right. But instead of going to the mortgage company or utility companies, the money was immediately transferred to an account I didn't recognize. My hands shook so badly I had to retake several photos with my phone. The account number kept appearing, over and over, until finally, I found a statement that showed the account holder's name, Brad's business account. Every single dollar I'd given them had gone into this account, and then been spent on things that had nothing to do with household expenses. Lease payments for a luxury SUV I'd never seen. Cash withdrawals at casinos. Purchases at jewelry stores and high-end restaurants. Dawn was breaking when I finished photographing everything. I had documented $43,000 in direct transfers from my checks into Brad's account. The dates matched every single request he'd made. I'd been funding his lavish lifestyle while he lied to my face, telling me I was saving my childhood home. The betrayal felt physical, like something sharp lodged behind my ribs. I packed a bag as quietly as I could, tears streaming down my face, and drove straight to Simone's apartment. She opened the door in her bathrobe, took one look at me, and let me in without a single question. I showed her the photos, my voice cracking as I explained. Simone, ever the paralegal, immediately started making a list. First, open a new bank account that Mom and Brad couldn't access. Second, get my belongings out of that house while they were both gone. Third, find a lawyer specializing in financial fraud. Simone helped me execute the plan over the next 2 days with military precision. We moved my stuff to a storage unit. I opened new accounts at a different bank and transferred what was left of the insurance money. Simone's boss referred me to Claudia Marsh, an attorney who agreed to meet me that Friday. Claudia listened to my story without interrupting, her gaze steady, reviewing all the photos I'd taken. She said I had a strong case for theft by deception, and we could pursue both criminal charges and civil recovery. Mom called me 17 times that Saturday. I didn't answer. She left voicemails alternating between worried pleas and angry demands. Brad sent texts, demanding to know where I was, accusing me of breaking my mother's heart. On Sunday morning, Claudia sent formal demand letters to both Mom and Brad, outlining the evidence of financial fraud and requiring them to preserve all documents. This was necessary, she explained, before filing anything with the court. Brad showed up at Simone's apartment Sunday evening. I watched from the window as he banged on the door, shouting my name. Simone had already called the police, and 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes. They talked to Brad in the parking lot while I gave my statement inside, my voice surprisingly steady. The officers took the demand letter and my documentation. They told Brad to leave and warned him not to come back. The next week crawled. I went to work, tried to act normal, all while my phone exploded with messages from relatives I barely knew. Mom had apparently told everyone I'd abandoned her in her time of need. Brad was spinning a story about me being mentally unstable and accusing him of impossible things. My aunt left a voicemail saying I should be ashamed of myself for treating my mother this way. Family is family, she lectured, and you don't destroy family over money. Claudia filed the civil suit on a Thursday. Brad and Mom were served at the house on Friday morning. Mom called me, crying, begging me to drop the lawsuit and come home. She said we could work it out as a family and didn't need lawyers getting involved. I told her I wasn't dropping anything and hung up. Brad sent a text that night, "You're making a huge mistake." Then, chillingly, "Family doesn't owe family anything." That phrase. It unlocked something inside me. I remembered Brad saying it at dinner months ago, when I'd asked if I should write up loan agreements for the money I was giving them. He'd laughed it off, saying, "Family doesn't operate like a business. Family doesn't owe family anything." He'd used that exact phrase to make me feel guilty for even thinking about documentation. Now he was twisting it to suggest I had no right to want my money back. The discovery phase started in January. Claudia subpoenaed Brad's bank records and found exactly what I documented, plus more. A staggering $51,000 of my money had flowed through his account. He'd bought a boat I'd never seen or even known existed. He'd made payments on a timeshare in Florida. He'd paid off credit cards and funded his gambling habit. None of it had gone to household expenses or genuine family emergencies. Mom's deposition happened in February. She sat across from Claudia in a sterile conference room, admitting she'd known Brad was taking the money, but she claimed she thought he was investing it for our future. She cried through most of her testimony, repeating that she never meant for this to happen. Claudia asked if Mom had ever verified where the money went, or if she just blindly trusted Brad. Mom just kept saying she trusted her husband and didn't think she needed to verify anything. Brad's deposition was a different animal entirely. He came prepared with his own attorney and a meticulously rehearsed story. He claimed every dollar had been spent on legitimate family expenses and that I'd given the money as gifts, not loans. His attorney tried to argue that family members giving each other money created no legal obligation for repayment. But Claudia demolished this argument. She presented the documented lies about what the money was supposedly for. She showed the mortgage records proving there had been no foreclosure risk. She showed receipts proving the dental work had been covered by insurance. Brad's fabricated story fell apart under questioning. The trial was scheduled for June, but Brad's attorney approached Claudia in May with a settlement offer. They proposed Brad would pay back $30,000 over 5 years if I dropped the criminal complaint I'd filed. Claudia said it was insulting. I agreed. We went to trial. The trial lasted 4 intense days. I testified, detailing every request Brad had made, every single lie he'd told. Mom testified reluctantly, her words contradicting Brad's story about the money being gifts. The boat dealer testified about selling Brad a $23,000 fishing boat just 3 months after my dad died. The casino provided records of Brad's gambling losses, totaling $18,000 during the same time period. Brad's attorney tried to argue that I'd given the money willingly, but Claudia proved, piece by meticulous piece, that each transaction had been secured through specific, false representations about what the money would be used for. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, their verdict was clear, in my favor. They awarded me $51,000 in compensatory damages, plus an additional $37,000 in punitive damages for fraud. The judge ordered Brad to pay within 90 days or face wage garnishment. He also, crucially, referred the case to the district attorney for potential criminal prosecution. Mom divorced Brad 3 months after the trial. She called to tell me, her voice small. She said she was sorry for not protecting me. Sorry for letting him manipulate both of us. Sorry for choosing him over me when it mattered most. I told her I needed time, a lot of time, before we could even begin to have a relationship again. She said she understood, and she would wait as long as it took. Brad, in a last-ditch effort, declared bankruptcy trying to avoid paying the judgment, but Claudia just smiled. Fraud debts, she explained, couldn't be discharged. He'd be paying me for years. I used some of the settlement money to finish my associate degree and then transferred to a 4-year university. I moved into my own apartment, a place where I felt safe and respected. I learned what it felt like to have boundaries that people actually acknowledged and honored. Simone became my chosen family, the person who showed up, unfailingly, when it truly mattered. My dad's insurance money had been meant to give me a better future. And despite Brad's best efforts to steal it, that's exactly what I was building, brick by painful, triumphant brick. Sometimes, family doesn't mean the people you're related to by blood. Sometimes, it means the people who have your back when everyone else is taking yours.